Good afternoon. Uh, Today I'm going to be going over the objective of guiding grocers manufacturer company through organizational change. Once again, another snow day, so we'll get straight into it. I just kind of made a brief overview of kind of what I feel like is going on with grocers manufacturing. So it's traditional manufacturing organization facing competition and technology shifts. And it requires major operational and cultural change. And that's going to be the big problem for grocers manufacturing is how can they break through that operational change and the overall culture behind it. So why organizational change is complex? Emotional reactions from employees, this is like one of the biggest things, probably the biggest thing with organizational change is stakeholder emotions and stakeholder culture as a result of making change. As I've mentioned in videos before, people don't like to go through change. It disrupts routines and habits, as mentioned in the second point there, and it just creates uncertainty, as the third point says, as to what is to come next. So job security becomes a concern and all of that. So they need to be. It brings more stress onto the table when they feel like there is no backing, or they don't feel like what they have inputted into the company isn't being put back into them. They then lack the trust and require the leadership and trust once again from leaders to give them the ability to further and make that organizational change shift. It's very hard for someone to come in one day and hear that everything they've done the day before, scrap it, we're working on something completely different. That's real, like that brings people down. So it's how we can bring people down and then bring them right back up again. How can we bring that culture straight back to a T where they are going and being positive in their day? So key stakeholders in this all would be executives, managers, employees, customers, suppliers, and union reps. So this is just your main. And if it was a public company, this would obviously be like investors and stuff like that would also be in this. Probably a board of directors would be up there with executives. But it dwindles down from this. Really, there could be arrows going to each one because executives need to set the role for managers. Managers need to set the role for employees. Employees have to keep that culture, keep that positive uplift up so that customers keep their happiness and keep their overall well-being into purchasing goods still from the manufacturing company. And then that goes straight for suppliers. So obviously, as a manufacturing company, Gross is big with suppliers and stuff. And if people are not buying our product, suppliers will not be giving us their products. So we need to keep those contracts, keep those things in line so we have that. And then obviously, union reps are a big deal with this because when culture dies down, this is when things like unions can form and go on strike and stuff, and you don't want that to happen. You need them to be bought in so that there is no strikes, there is no negative energy coming from a union, for example. So going straight into the diagram, I have made this with the help of ChatGPT, trying to making it into an image as it is. So obviously the top thing is external pressure. So competition, cost, and tax are the big reasons why it's hard to go through organizational change. It's very expensive typically nowadays, especially because of the technology that you have to implement. AI and stuff is not cheap to implement. And then competition, you have to implement it. You feel that you almost go into crisis. There's urgency about it if you don't change because competition may be changing. And then, as I mentioned before, key stakeholders is there as well. And then the stages. So stage one is awareness. So this is your why change is needed. Kind of being aware of it, making others aware of it. So this is the resistance, fear, and confusion comes in from people, and you kind of need to fight against that resistance, fight against that fear. How can we make people not scared of what's to come in the future? And then moving on from that, you got planning. So this is your vision and strategy. Skill gaps and misalignment is the big problem here. Everything needs to be aligned. There needs to be a good timeline, but there needs to be a timeline that is realistic. SMART goals is a big thing here. mentioned it in other videos prior. It really is important to have SMART goals. It needs to be attainable, it needs to be intelligent in what you're doing. And I'll mention later on, one thing I got from a Harvard Business Review article is that if you're going to set a timeline, just because you set a timeline, you have to try and make things perfect. While you're creating that timeline, you can still be implementing things, making progress on that timeline, so that you're not wasting any extra time. And then obvious obstacles with this are resistance, fear and uncertainty, poor communication, lack of leadership. And then strategies to overcome those things are communication, training and support, employee involvement, and leadership support. And I'll mention those in a few slides of kind of going in more detail of each one of those. And then stage 3 is implementation. So actually implementing the new system and getting training going so that employees and stuff are learning and becoming adaptable to what's to come. The problem with this is it's easy to get burnt out on this. Employees don't want to sit through meetings. They don't want to sit in calls. They don't want to sit in taking tests and stuff. That's not their role. But it's something that you need to get them to do so that you can sell them on the fact that this is important. And then mistakes, obviously, is going to happen when you're all working with new change, new technology and stuff. People are not going to be familiar with it, so mistakes are going to happen. It's be realistic to expect mistakes, but let's not make big mistakes. Make mistakes that can be fixed, not mistakes that could put you in crisis once again. And then pushback from employees, but that's where you get to stage 4 with reinforcement. Culture and rewards. How can you keep company culture and then bring in, incentivize it, bring in rewards? So is it a monetary incentive, or is it a physical incentive where you're giving them something as a reward, whatever it may be? And then feedback overall. It's also something that can go into reinforcement is surveys from employees going to managers, managers going to executives, and just feedback within that as a loop to making it all better as a whole. And then giving feedback. People underestimate so much how important it is to give feedback to employees. Employees really appreciate when they know that they're appreciated. So it's important to know that you're appreciated and to let them know that they are appreciated. And if all of these things are successful, a successful change brings productivity and overall trust in the organization. So in this instance, Gross's Manufacturing, if they implement organizational change correctly, it will bring about productivity. Productivity will increase. They should be able to keep up with the change and avoid any kind of crisis that may occur. And a successful change will bring more trust into the company as a whole. So if anything has to change again, employees are going to be more trusting that it will be successful in the future. So obviously stages, the first stage is, as I mentioned, awareness. Explain why change is necessary. So this is important. First thing you should do is let people know. And then build urgency. So one thing I got from Harvard Business Review is urgency is really important. You need to not be too urgent, but be urgent in the sense of you have to be going for it before a crisis could occur, before you can't like wait till the last minute. You need to have some kind of urgency in what you're implementing. And then, as I mentioned in the first point, share the vision. The vision should be shared company-wide. Everyone should be included with the vision, and any feedback that is necessary, that is possible, needs to be taken with a grain of salt. Realistically, if somebody doesn't like something, maybe look into it. Maybe they're correct in whatever they may be looking at. And then stage 2 planning. Develop strategy. So this is just where you develop that strategy, but while developing that strategy, can you already be implementing it during the development stage? And then involving employees in this development strategy. I've mentioned this so many times. It's so important to have employees involved and make them feel like they are involved, and set realistic timelines. So set timelines that are possible, that are credible, but while creating those timelines, already be working, as I mentioned before. Because if you're already working while creating a timeline, this allows your timeline to maybe change. Your timeline will change. You may not meet a certain date. You may make a date by a lot. It's how you can make those dates where you don't become lackluster and like I have so much time. Procrastination will really hurt you if you are changing and you are procrastinating while doing so. And then stage 3, implementation. So this is, like I mentioned, training programs, new systems, and new behaviors. So getting involved and getting familiar with all the new implementations, and it's going to be realistic to be sitting in training programs, to be dealing with new systems, and to be dealing with new behaviors. As a manager, if you've never dealt with change before, there's going to be many new behaviors you have not seen from your employees. So it's important that you understand those behaviors and you know how to give them the correct feedback and the correct reinforcement. So stage 4, reward those new behaviors. If they're good in a sense of people are getting involved, wanting to be involved in the training plans, wanting to be involved in the plan that is being created, reward that. Embed that into culture. So maybe that becomes a familiar thing within Gross's manufacturing, is that rewards and incentives are embedded into the culture. The better you do, the more incentives you get. That should be that's a simple thing that just gets people working harder. Incentives are such an important thing overall, and they work so well. And it's not even like just during Christmas incentives or end of year incentives, but throughout the year if you're making plans and like let's say you hit a certain timeline and you beat a date, there should be an incentive for beating a date because that will push people to be more urgent. That builds that urgency. And then continuous feedback. So this can go all around the spectrum. So managers, employees, stakeholders, whatever it may be, anyone involved with Gross's manufacturing should be giving feedback continuously so that change can be developed and become more successful in the future. And then how the diagram helps stakeholders. So the diagram I created provides visual clarity. It's very simple. It's easy to read, and it's not like overly detailed. So in the sense of it's not confusing to the eye or nothing. It's nicely colored and stuff, so people can kind of know which is which. And it shows the stages, and then off to the side, it obviously shows the obstacles, and then how to fix those obstacles. What are ways that can be attacked of those obstacles can be attacked. And then it encourages cooperation and then just shared understanding overall. If everyone has a picture of that diagram during the change, everyone will know the different stages. Everyone will understand why certain things are happening. So it could be important overall to just have your employees familiar with the diagram in this sense. So Gross's manufacturing, if every employee maybe had a picture of the diagram on their desk or had some kind of familiarity with the diagram, they would understand. Be like, okay, we're in stage 1, we're in stage 3. What is my role in this stage? What can I do in this stage to become more successful, to reach that stage 5, that success, that trust, that productivity at the end of it all? Then, as I mentioned, those obstacles I said I'd go in more detail about. This fear of job loss, big problem. I mean, if someone's concerned they're going to lose their job, this is where feedback becomes in job security. You just let people know that your job is going to be secure if you can implement the productivity, implement the change in a good manner. If you don't act in a negative way towards change, you're not typically going to lose your job unless it's a severe scenario or whatever change being implemented makes your role not needed anymore. And that's just nowadays realistic with the way technology and stuff's going. Some jobs are not needed anymore. And then lack of trust. Fear of job loss kind of goes straight into this because if jobs become lost, other employees will then lose trust in the company. So it's kind of important to negate job loss in the sense of it builds more trust in other employees that when change occurs, it doesn't mean that they got to worry about their job security. And then just being successful will also implement into this trust. And then poor communication and burnout. And then strategies to overcome them. I mentioned them briefly when just going over the problems. Transparent communication. So this goes straight into bad communication. If you're transparent, there will not be bad communication. Being transparent is the biggest thing to change. Everything should be clear and out there for people to understand. And then leadership modeling. This can come from diagrams or just setting an example as a whole by yourself. So like what role are you playing throughout the day that is a leading example for employees, for stakeholders? What kind of vision, what kind of aura are you kind of giving off in the sense as a leadership role that others can build off of, that others can see and be like, okay, that's what I want to reach, that's what I want to go after. And then what kind of training and support are you giving them? So are these meetings, are you hiring? Is Gross's Manufacturing going to hire new people in the AI development stage, for example? And in these IT people, are they going to train and support and know how to support employees that may not be familiar with it, especially people that may be older and stuff that don't have much familiarity with technology? How can you give them the support, the training to where they can understand it? And then everyone being involved is the biggest thing. So participation is so important to change. Can we get everyone participating so that we can be successful? So here's the HBR article integration that kind of goes straight off my diagram to support it. So the first one is a sense of urgency. This one was by Cotter, and assuming crisis will create urgency. So the biggest thing is crisis will create urgency, but waiting for crisis to then create the urgency is not smart. You don't want to wait for crisis or underestimate the crisis as mentioned in bullet point 4, because sometimes you may wait too long and then you're done. And then there's some crisis you can't turn back from. And then going over the line. So don't go over too far over the line in sense of urgency. Don't bring up so much urgency to where it becomes manipulation. People should not feel manipulated to be involved in a change. Organizational change should not feel like manipulation. They should feel like they're a part of the change. They're wanting success. If they're going to be successful in the future, they got to be a part of that change. And then HBR Article 2 from Harvard Business Review is emotional buy-in and culture. I can't pronounce the last name of the guy that did this one, but the time is a big thing. So are you setting realistic timelines? And are those timelines, are you taking them and like it says in bullet point 2, don't wait till the process is perfect to take action. So with those timelines, don't wait till the timeline's perfect. Don't wait till the planning is perfect to already be taking action. You should already be implementing action, already be implementing some kind of developmental strategy. So in this case with Gross's Manufacturing, what is the new technology that we can get on the manufacturing floor to develop a few more things per day, to build more per day? Can we get more stuff out the door per day so we're building more profit? And can we already be taking action to know whether or not certain plans are successful or unsuccessful? Then the educational component, so go ahead and have that training, those planning involved, get that buy-in and get that culture. And several things that the Harvard Business Review article mentioned was that people need to feel that it's necessary to be involved in these trainings, that they want to be involved in these trainings to develop themselves, develop their own skills, to be more successful, even if it may not be with a certain company. And then real life experience. So one place, I worked at a Gate City Veterinary Hospital in Greensboro. And at the veterinary hospital, I observed us going from SCS and actually MSDS sheets, which I did both. I created SCS and MDS sheets, but we don't use MDS sheets anymore. So technology for this is going from taking something that people have put online and then still working it to where we're creating the tech online. So there's SCS sheets online, and then as well as having physical copies of them. Most employees kind of don't want to do this because it's obviously harder to keep track of stuff online, and then with paper as well, having two separate things that also have to be aligned all the time. They're having to implement things in the computer and then also implement them into paper copies, and it becomes confusing for certain people. So it's getting people bought in. The manager got people kind of bought in on the fact of if anything were to happen, hacking or something like that, and we lose the technology aspect of it, we'll always have the backup in the paper copies. If the paper copies somehow always get lost, then we have the technology component to where we have backups in the technology realm. And this just kind of took some training to get people familiar with how to create this overall. And I ended up creating the whole SDS sheets, but then it was getting people bought into the fact of every time the animal comes in, what medication they're on and all that, and how that's being put in a certain way. It has to be put in the computer, labeled correctly, so nothing gets lost. Many animals are named the exact same, so how can we differentiate them from another animal, whether it be like Leo the first or Leo the 800th that you have come in? How can we make those Leos different? And this comes from training, and then eventually people become familiar with it, and it becomes acceptance where people are so familiar where it becomes second thought. And then to conclude, so change is continuous. It should always be evolving, and people are central to success. This has always been a factor. People will always be central to success. Even when technology is implemented, somebody is behind the technology. Someone is creating the code or whatever it is so that the technology is successful. And then visual models obviously support effective leadership. They build better ideals. They create a sense of understanding for people to be able to look at. And then my two HBR article sources. So the first one was by Ashkenaz, Internal Buy-in Will Make or Break Your Growth Strategy. And then, as I mentioned before, Cotter, Sense of Urgency, Harvard Business School Working Knowledge. Thank you for listening. I enjoy the snow.